House Calendar Number 99, House Resolution 691. Resolved that upon the adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 2749 to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to improve the safety of food in the global market and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived except those arising under Clause 9 or 10 of Rule 21. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill, the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions of the bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended to final passage without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chairman and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and 2, 1 motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The House will be in order. Members will remove their conversations from the floor on both sides of the aisle. The gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlelady from North Carolina, Representative Fox. All time yielded during consideration of the rule is for debate only. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, today the House will consider H.R. 2749, the Food Safety Enhancement Act, legislation that will help to make our food supply safer, cleaner, and provide much-needed peace of mind to American families. Too often recently, we have watched horrible news reports showing stories of Americans who have become terribly sick or have died from eating the same simple foods that we take for granted and consume every day. Think about that for a minute. Our country, one of the wealthiest in the world with the most bountiful food supply and endless choices for consumers, has been in the grip of a food panic that shows no signs of easing up. Peanut butter, spinach, cookie dough, beef, tomatoes, sprouts, pistachios every day. It seems like it is something new. And we know that every year 76 million Americans are sickened from consuming contaminated food, and 5,000 of those persons die. This issue has probably touched every one of us in some way. In too many cases, they are not random, unpredictable events, but widespread and systematic, and sadly, they are also preventable. They come about because of flaws in our food safety system. I'm happy to say that these gaps in protection are closed by this legislation. Under this bill, we give the FDA new authority, new tools, and a new source of funding to carry out its vital mission. Thanks to this bill, the FDA will make more frequent inspections of food processing facilities, develop a food traceback system to pinpoint the source of foodborne illnesses, and have enhanced powers to ensure that imported foods are safe. The bill provides the FDA better access to the records of food producers and manufacturers without having to wait for an outbreak of foodborne illness. The bill provides strong, flexible enforcement tools, and importantly, it strengthens penalties imposed on food facilities that fail to comply with safety requirements. We require food facilities to have safety plans in place to identify and mitigate hazards, one of the best ways to make an immediate improvement to food safety. The legislation before us is bipartisan, and I think it is safe to say it will fundamentally change the way we protect the safety of our food supply. It's worth noting the bill was approved by the Energy and Commerce Committee back on June 17th by voice vote. That's how broad the support was. And we know this bill enjoys a lot of support from all members. It received 280 votes yesterday, including 50 Republican votes that I'm happy to have, and very confident that the bill will enjoy the same level of support today. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to enter a copy of an editorial from today's New York Times into the record.
Without objection.
The page today made the following points, and I quote, "Under the current system, the FDA can only try to coax a food production facility to voluntarily recall its product after people have grown sick or even died. The legislation, the best in years, would give the agency a great deal more power and responsibility to prevent such outbreaks. The FDA would finally have the authority to set strong science-based safety standards for the growing, harvesting, and transporting of both domestic and imported food. The agency would then require each food production facility to come up with the best safety plan showing how it would meet those standards. Right now, several years or more can elapse before the FDA does a full on-site inspection of a food facility. Most inspections are done by states, and not all plants are visited. Under this bill, so-called high-risk facilities, one where there have been problems in the past, or where ones that handle easily spoiled items like raw seafood, would have to be inspected by the FDA every 6 to 12 months. Lower-risk facilities, which deal with items like dried packaged products with no history of causing problems, would be inspected every 18 months to 3 years. That ends the quote. As others have noted, the legislation is supported by a range of organizations, including Consumers Union, Consumer Federation of America, American Public Health Association, Association of Schools of Public Health, Center for Science and the Public Interest, the Pew Charitable Trust, Trust for Americans' Health, and the Grocery Manufacturers Association. I was disappointed yesterday that some farm organizations seem unwilling to support the legislation, even after the committee negotiated in good faith to address their concerns. That lack of support cost us the two-thirds support needed for passage. I want to address a few other concerns, including one complaint that every farm has to pay an annual $500 fee. I would like to point out that that requirement does not apply to farms that sell directly to consumers, meaning most, if not all, small family or organic farms would be covered. Another concern centered on what the bill would mean to small organic farmers and whether the larger FDA power would interfere with their operations. The bill specifically says the FDA can only issue standards for the riskiest products, and the FDA is also directed to take into consideration the impact on small-scale and diversified farms and on wildlife habitat, conservation practices, watershed protection efforts, and organic production methods. And yet another issue centered on whether confidential farm records might be disclosed by the FDA to others. In fact, the only new records that the FDA can have access to relate only to fresh produce, for which the FDA has issued a safety standard or that is the subject of an active investigation of a foodborne illness outbreak. It is my hope that the small farmers in my district in upstate New York and elsewhere see this bill as a positive step forward in improving safety. Ultimately, we should feel confident about the quality of our food, regardless of whether it comes from a big farm or a small, family-run organic farm. Let me touch on one other issue as well. The legislation does not include strong new language to restrict the current overuse, I would say abuse, of antibiotics by farmers who raise livestock for human consumption. We have legislation that has strong and growing number of supporters who, like me, worry that the use of non-therapeutic antibiotics in our food supply poses an enormous and growing health risk for all Americans. It is my plan to make a strong push on this legislation later in the year, and I hope all my colleagues who are ready to vote for this food safety bill will be with us when we take up the preservation of antibiotics for the Medical Treatment Act. Let's approve this food safety bill right now and start taking the steps to make sure our food supply is as safe as it can be, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves her time.
Do we have any speakers?
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you. Of them die, and I would like to yield 3 minutes. Gentleman from